Hello, sports fans. It's Tuesday, January 7th. Welcome to Cleats by Dre. I'm Dre. Let's talk some sports. Hello. It's the first Tuesday of January. It's 2 days from the Orange Bowl, where the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are 2.5-point favorites over the Penn State Nittany Lions. A Penn State team who really hasn't been in title contention in 30 years? And realistically, same can be said of the Irish. Especially if you were in the stands the last time the Irish played a major bowl game in Miami. When one particularly uncouth Alabama fan sitting behind me accurately announced the Irish team that ran out of the tunnel as, "Here comes a high school team," as Alabama greats such as Eddie Lacy, Amari Cooper, TJ Yeldon, and AJ McCarron pirouetted, outleaped, outmaneuvered, out-boyfriended a Miss America candidate. Yeah, they took out the Irish 42-14 on the wings of Lene Kukua. R.I.P. girl. It's Notre Dame Penn State, and I've got the alumni panel back together for round 3. Midwest Mike Martin and Jimmy Amarillo Slim Guards. I know, folks, some of you might prefer to hear me talk about some Giants, what's going on with Mr. Mara, keeping the buddy cop duo of Dable and Shanes for another year. Some of you might want me to talk about the recent lethargy running rampant at Madison Square Garden with those Knickerbockers in their 3-game losing streak. Maybe you're seeking some hot stove baseball, or maybe some talk on a history-making Duke Blue Devil squad. But hey, it's 2025. Fractional is in right now. And I'm a fractional podcaster. While the Irish are on the cusp, this is what you get. This is the fraction I lean into right now. So join for an hour of Mike, James, and I as we catch up on all things Irish, close off loose ends on the Sugar Bowl, reflect on the ultimate MFer of a head coach Marcus Freeman's become, upgrade the Tebow scale of retail store that Riley Leonard has achieved, foreshadow, this New Yorker learns a bit about a Main Street American treasure of a chain with 82 locations and 19,000 employees. Education. Most importantly, we preview and make predictions of Penn State and the Orange Bowl. So buckle up, and in the words of Marcus Freeman, choose hard. I throw it to myself. All right, CBDers, if you've been listening lately, you know we're hot on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We're making a run in the inaugural 12-team college football playoff. After a 23-10 victory over those Georgia Bulldogs last Thursday, up next is Penn State. Some would say a mirror program to us. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I'm bringing back my fellow alumni and Sports Business Club leadership team, Mike and James, to wrap up any loose ends I missed from the Sugar Bowl recap and look ahead to that Orange Bowl. So Mike and James, welcome. First off, I just want to take this moment to thank you both for your participation in my DraftKings season-long NFL Fantasy Football League. It's really competitive this year. I barely won again. It's just good to have you guys close in regular contact. So thanks for that, guys. How are we doing
Thanks for
today?
mentioning it. I'm sure the listeners were waiting to hear those results.
We gotta keep them informed on all kinds of things going on in our lives. All right. Kidding aside, on to the Irish. Last we chatted a little after midseason, right? We were like 6-1 or 7-1. I think it was before Navy. I'd say the season's no longer boring. Um, but Mike, I want to start with you real quick, right? Because you were at the first round game versus Indiana. I mean, lots for us to catch up on, but that game in particular, take us through that experience. What was campus like? Was it stadium like? First home playoff game.
Yeah. Mazel tov, Andre, and thank you for having us on again. Third visit of the year. totally awesome that Notre Dame's having a good enough season to predicate a three season panel discussion. So yeah, the Notre Dame game was cool. The Notre Dame Indiana game was cool. So obviously cold, right? We got invited with a friend of Jimmy's from school. Took a bus down. Interesting tidbit, I guess, is we tailgated in the bookstore lot, which I've never done
Mm.
before. Um, Bookstore's cool, right? You've got like the basketball courts right there, so there's
Hmm.
room for kids to run around and also more room for kids not to get lost. But I don't feel like I was necessarily in the throes of like stadium lot madness. We
Mm.
did, my brother was at the game with a couple nephews of mine. So we did wander over to Stadium Lot. So the pregame atmosphere in Stadium Lot was cool in the sense it was really cold. So huge carbon footprint coming out of South Bend that day. Like a lot of stuff was on fire as people were trying to keep warm. And then, obviously not like a ton of games of bags being played, but like
Yeah.
people huddling around and kind of warming the cockles with brown liquor. But I had my son, right? So I was more in like I'm flying this thing at 30,000 feet cruise control, and these night games are long days too, right? So you've got when you've got a 9-year old, like I'm more of a chaperone than a rabid Notre Dame fan. So pregame was cool, but muted, at least on my side, probably not for like a lot of people there. Game experience was really interesting, right? So I would say the game sucked.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. I don't know how young our audience skews. I don't know if that's a four-letter word, but it was
We'll
boring, right?
play. We'll leave it in.
Indiana, they didn't show up either in any way that I thought was like meaningful. They didn't show up in
Yeah.
terms of in terms of like a
Hmm.
real talent competition.
Hmm.
I don't think that it didn't seem like they kind of laid all their cards on the line to see if they could make it competitive or potentially just get blown out. Some people reflected it reminded them of when we played Alabama in like that 2020, 2021 when they had Devonta Smith.
Yeah.
And it was like Brian Kelly coached to lose by 17 points. That's how it felt like Indiana
Yeah.
did. So the game itself was somewhat anticlimactic, which I somewhat expected. I wasn't actually that keen
Mhm.
initially to go to that game, but I will say the crowd was better than any crowd I've been. I mean, so the game starts and everybody's on their feet, right? And there had been snow, and I brought a ton of blankets again because I got a 9-year old. And I say to my son Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, like sit on this blanket, when it's time to sit down. And Jimmy looks at me, he says, Dad, I'm not sitting down this entire game.
Oh, he was because you were worried going in that he'd be leaving at halftime.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
guys stayed?
So he says, I'm not sitting down the entire game. And I'm like,
Love it.
that's cool, but like I've been to a lot of Notre Dame games, and after the first kickoff, we may stand up like on a 4th and 1 or something like that, but that'll be about it. But the crowd actually stood the entire game. I did not sit the
Good.
entire game.
Good.
So crowd showed up in a big way. If I'm
Good.
being honest, right, like I mean, it's antithetical to the Notre Dame thought process, but I mean, I don't think home games in late December are awesome in outdoor stadiums. Like it's
Hmm.
like I don't
Good
know if it would be a
TV. Good
stadium
TV.
upgrade.
Good TV sport kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just people are like they should play the first two rounds instead of the first two rounds in home stadiums. Like I don't necessarily. This is college football is it was very southern, but maybe it's a
Hmm.
mix of northern and southern, and so it's just a tough deal to have a number of home games in late December and South Bend. But again, I'm a Southern Californian, so uh, I'll take that. So good experience, good game, but um, you know, I think it would be more exciting with the more name opponent. I guess if I'm being honest.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I was one of the ones, and I'm still one of the ones thinking two rounds on campuses because I don't know the attendance figures on any of the quarterfinal games, but I know the ticket prices were plummeting. Where if you lived in New Orleans, that's a bad example. The game got moved for a horrible tragedy, but any of those games you could walk in for like $25, except for the Rose Bowl.
I actually have a thought on this, and I'd love to bounce it off you guys. My thought was so the Bulls are steering this right, but like for NCAA basketball tournament. They have the East region, the West region, but in the early rounds of the tournament, they geographically assign games, right? So it's
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
if if you're a 5 seed and you're Virginia and you're in the West region, they might have you play near DC, right? So, I mean, the
I don't
thing
know
is
if they
going to
do
be
that beyond the top four seeds. Like I think 1 through 4 get the home bid. I don't think they
okay.
do five.
Fair
I don't
enough.
think they do that. Yeah.
Fair. My point is just broadly. So maybe I should have said the 4 seed, but my point broadly is
Yeah.
would be nice per se, like if Indy or Minnesota
Hmm.
or Detroit, if like we could use some, if instead of just assigning these bowls, if there could be kind of a Midwestern home stadium for what I call the second round. I think they call it the first round, but like I think the attendance might be more robust. It's just 3 flights is tough, man. I mean,
Yeah.
and Notre Dame is a specific example. There's not as many alumni, right? So I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of these schools are huge. They're lousy with alumni, but it's just tough to go to Louisiana, Miami, and then Atlanta on three
Yeah.
different trips for the
Totally.
playoffs.
You
Sounds
could
like
kind of bring
baseball a
in
little
some of
bit.
that.
Go
Oh,
ahead, James.
sorry, Dre. You
No,
could
go.
bring
You
in
go.
some of that, like college football is. I always like it as kind of a regional sport. I think it's interesting the different ways to do that. So I think Mike's concept is interesting. How you could bring in some of that regional
Yeah.
competitiveness. And yeah, I know what you're saying, like basketball. It's like when KU is a one, they always go through Kansas City
Hmm.
or St. Louis, and then like Duke and UNC go with like Greensboro, Charlotte, whatever, it's like they reward those top teams and it's in like vicinity of all their alumni essentially.
Yeah. It reminds me of the baseball, right? The Super Regionals, College World Series. I think they kind of do that. I like it. I mean, I think the bigger conversation, and I don't want us to dive too much into it, is the power of the bowls, right? And that was our our case competition, when we really got together at school. But like, do we need to have the bowl games in the quarterfinals? I mean, kind of they have the power still. So
Well, I mean, how bizarre was it? I don't know. I just felt like we were watching like a vestige of the past when the Sugar Bowl president is like doddering around on stage, like the pride of the Sugar Bowl, and everyone's like, no one gives a shit, dude. Like we're going to like we won, we're going on to the next round, and he's like, wants to give his speech and everything.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
buddy, it's
I'm not
over.
done yet.
And I'm just like,
Which is weird. We won the Sugar Bowl. Now we're gonna go play in the Orange Bowl. So like we could win 2 bowls. Like
and that
Indiana
dick,
didn't even go to a bowl technically. Like
and
it's
that dick is probably making 7 figures a year,
oh totally,
like,
totally cronyism. Um,
yeah.
but look, let's go. All right, let's get to this season a bit more. James, I want to throw it to you because we were like it's been 6 or 7 games since we last spoke, but as this team's gone on this run, like what have you been most impressed with the squad? What surprised you about this run? Hit us up with what you've been seeing.
Yeah. So I was trying to go back and see when we last spoke. We were we were talking about how it was like, is this the most boring Notre Dame
Yeah.
season like we've ever experienced? And um it kind of was, but then it started like it gaining some momentum. But the whole time, I don't know if it's like this battered Notre Dame syndrome I have, but I wasn't sure how good Notre Dame actually was because we weren't really playing anybody.
Hmm.
But I looked at, we went Florida State, Virginia,
Right.
Army, USC. Defense is playing out of their mind.
Totally.
USC is kind of the outlier. They piled up.
Hmm.
I don't know that game. It's not the box score. I don't think is indicative of how the game necessarily went. But and then our boy Riley Leonard, he's just steady Eddie, and the last 6 games, including Georgia, he's got a total of 10 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He's got, let's see, over 6 games, a whopping 101 completions on 151 attempts. So,
Good
um,
percentage.
yeah, a decent percentage,
Yeah.
not throwing the ball a ton, not having to throw the ball a ton. getting obviously a lot of help from uh, Love and Price. I don't know. I mean, I'm bouncing around here. I'm impressed that the team, there's so many past Notre Dame teams that would have tripped up on one of
Hmm.
these games.
Hmm.
Like they would have tripped up on like Virginia. And it's so easy in hindsight to be like, that was a cakewalk schedule. It's like, well, Notre Dame botches cakewalk
Hmm.
schedules all the time.
Hmm.
And for them, when we spoke after Northern Illinois, I was like, I love Marcus Freeman, but I don't know if this is going to work. Like you can't lose to Marshall and Northern Illinois. And now people are like, let's get a statue, and like, it's just amazing how things change. They've got this like humble confidence that's really endearing. Like
Hmm.
it's not swagger,
Hmm.
but they're not afraid to like go into these games. And I know we'll talk more about Georgia, but it just like I just have burned in my brain Notre Dame going from Midwestern stadiums where everything feels a little bit slower, and then they get on the fast track indoors against like an Alabama or a Clemson, LSU way back in the day, and just get run out of the building. And here we are. Like we've got the boys. They can run with them, or at least like hit them in the mouth and go punch for punch.
Yeah.
A couple thoughts on Riley, right? So one, how I mean, how do you think like the Mary Elizabeths and the Catherines on campus? I mean, this guy leads with Jesus. I mean, he leads, he follows with Jesus, and then he hits you like a third time with Jesus in any conversation. As a father of a daughter, you know, I mean, I pray that Riley Leonard's, somebody on the Riley Leonard family tree walks through my door at some point. Just a gentleman. Maybe not the first guy I would sit down and have a beer with, but a gentle, gentle soul.
I
Dude, a
think my
quick
mother's in
one.
love with
I
him.
was in my living room. We still had our Hanukkah decorations up, and my wife Karen looks at me. She's like, "Oh, a lot of Jesuses he's throwing out there after the game." And I was like, "Hey, Notre Dame has three parts. It's the Catholics, the academics, and then the football, diehards. You could be any of those."
And obviously he's like evangelical. That's a lot of
Dude,
Jesus, even for the Catholics. They're
dude,
like, whoa,
he's
buddy. We're not that
Yeah,
close with him.
yeah. We go to church for the wine, pal.
That matters. Like,
Uh, but yeah, love him, and yeah, maybe we'll touch. We don't need to get into it now, but the Riley Leonard run against Georgia, maybe the most macho run I've seen out of a
which
Notre
one?
Dame.
Which one? The
The
seven
one,
yard
the one that he
flip.
sealed the game with. I think sometimes because he's boring and he doesn't throw the ball well, you kind of forget. But there's a little steel in those guts. I mean, that was like an Elway against the Packers Super Bowl-esque run to that first down.
Dude,
He was not going
that
to be
was
denied, and
that
he
was
was
such a
going to
good
win
one.
that collision. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take a guy that I know is drinking Fantas on a Friday night, just crushing game film and getting ready to run over dudes as my quarterback any day of the week.
Let's stick on Riley because I had a question. James, I was going to ask you. You coined our Aldi Tebow, right, with his style. Has he graduated? Has he been promoted to higher level grocery store chains, or is he still Aldi Tebow, or what level is Riley at this point?
I've given it some thought, and I think he's Cabela's Tebow now, and it's not a
Okay.
grocery store, but you could still buy your jerky and you can buy the munitions to get your jerky. And so very Southern, but yeah,
Very.
like that if that nice, soft-spoken, my mom basically told me she was disappointed in me that I wasn't him, can be like tough as hell. Man, I don't know. Put him in the camo at Cabela's and let him give him a gun, eat some jerky.
I feel like we're playing like a Monopoly Go or something, and like he's moved on from the budget grocery store to rest stop. No, it's not a rest stop. It's a what outlet. Where do Cabela's live? Do they live in strip malls, outlets?
Forgive me, Andre, you're kind of showing your New York
I just
Judaism a little
Googled
bit.
Cabela's to remind myself.
A little
So,
New York Judaism. It's a little more refined than like a Bass Pro Shop, but same
okay.
deal.
All right.
Gigantic. Uh, yeah.
But
You
then,
find Cabela's in locations where like there's plenty of land, like also known as not New York, and then like they're huge, right? And it's yeah, but it's definitely not like an Aldi in terms of the price point. Like you go there, you're gonna have a
yeah.
good experience, you know.
So we're Cabela's Tebow, and we're on our way to. I mean, what does he become eventually, or is he at his apex right now?
I I don't know what he like his like, I don't think we've seen his best game, but we haven't had to. And I I think Notre Dame, I don't think it's going to happen against Penn State, but if Notre Dame was down 14, they might that's when the rubber would meet the road and
We've really
we'd have
never
to see
seen
him.
that. We don't really see
Hmm?
that, right?
Yeah, like when it's obvious passing downs, how would he do? And I have my suspicions, but we're keeping
Yeah,
these vibes high on
keeping that
this.
vibes high. I got a Riley stat because I think people I saw online laughing at his Sugar Bowl MVP. They saw, oh, 90 yards passing, 80 yards rushing. And I think with Riley, I think I've watched enough now. The thing with his stats, they're not empty calories. There's no empty calories there. Like those are all earned yards. And so like I looked at his 14 carries and 80 yards running. 8 of the 14 carries were first downs.
Mm,
And the ones that weren't, one was over 10 yards, two were 6 yards. One that was 0 yards was the fourth and one that he got, barely stopped at. And I think I mean, this is him going back when he was at Duke. You might remember the Clemson game. They won 28-7, 8 carries, 98 yards and a touchdown. The game against us, my other half of us, Duke versus Notre Dame, 8 carries, 88 yards. I think the theme, so he gets these hard runs in big games. I guess he has also had great defenses. So like Duke won that game against Clemson 28-7, right? 21-14 lost to Notre Dame. I think is it complementary football, right? Is this he's never really had to do a shootout. But hard yards. I mean, he's running for first downs. He's running for touchdowns. He's doing play action for
yeah.
touchdowns.
So
It's
my thought on oh, go ahead, James.
I was just gonna say it's apples and oranges, but I would say like the flip inverse of that would be like Joe Burrow on this year's Cincinnati Bengals, where he's like, we have no defense. I'm gonna have to go out and throw for 400 and 4 touchdowns today for us to win. We've never had to ask anything like that of Riley Leonard. And that's great. We shouldn't have to apologize. Like it's working. Like, just because he hasn't put together like this Heisman resume, like doesn't matter. Team's winning.
Hmm. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say, so there's been two games. They lost to Northern Illinois, and then they kind of invited USC back into the game. And both those games, like pivotal plays in the game, were Riley Leonard not being able to execute a pass down the field. So it's really not in his bag, right? Which I think we've kind of come to accept with some of the things that he does that we like. Your non-empty calories, I think, really makes sense. And so I give a lot of credit to Denbrock. I think Denbrock has figured out how to deploy Leonard as a weapon. And maybe it's not the way that you typically see teams win at a high level in college football, but and the announcers say it, complimentary football. He's a very nice piece to have to play complimentary football. And for the people that have been highly critical of Notre Dame and the way they beat Georgia, well, Denbrock used him in the means that were necessary to win the game. And
Yes.
and I think if we'll see how the next two games or the next two games, if there are two, if they can get by Penn State. But yeah, I agree. He's not. Notre Dame's in trouble if they're going to have. If Notre Dame's down 14 in the third quarter, I think they have to keep playing their game because I don't know that I don't know there's another way for Notre Dame to win with Riley Leonard's skill set.
I mean, yeah, Denbrock said after the game, he's like, we probably said offensive football back 15 years with like the way they played. And look, you don't see Riley in any draft boards anywhere. Nowhere. And he was at one time at Duke. He was because I guess they hadn't really seen it, but he's our guy. I mean, I've come full circle on him. That I see winning football with him at the helm, so I'm in for it.
It's a discussion for another day. I feel like he could be a tight end. Like
Taysom Hill.
Oh
if he
God,
practiced, he could be like
full
an
you go
edge
full
back.
Tebow? Didn't Tebow want to be tight end?
Well, my
Um,
beloved Denver Broncos, yes, like he's on our Ring of Fame. No.
I think it was the Jaguars or something. Tebow was going for it. Yeah, I mean, he's an athlete and he's tough. And Mike's right. We're like that was an incredible that's an Elway type play.
Absolutely. I was
To
all
get that
balls.
first down, get that drive going. Um, quick, let's pivot to probably the guy who's getting more praise and credit, and that's MF, whatever you want to call him, Marcus Freeman, as our head coach. Mike, I'm going to turn to you because I've been picking up in the text chat that Freeman's been winning you over, and you were not the biggest fan of the hire. Talk to me about when did Marcus Freeman win you over and how?
Yeah. I think, I was critical at the start of the season because, he's obviously got a defensive background, right? And I think the first two seasons we saw an offense that, I think it was in many ways obvious, couldn't compete at a high level. Last year, Gerald Parker, I think his name was the offensive coordinator. So you have a defensive head coach with an outstanding defensive coordinator, and then an inexperienced offensive coordinator, and you saw an offense that in pivotal moments didn't really know how to execute at a high level. And I mean, Sam Hartman played much better at Wake Forest than he did for Notre Dame last year. And there's a litany of reasons through the last 3 years why the team might struggle. In terms of this year, right? How did I go from kind of a Freeman doubter to a Freeman believer? I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that after the Northern Illinois loss, right? You saw Notre Dame they started performing in games against inferior opponents in a way that I really can't remember Notre Dame doing in a long time, right? I mean, they just started wiping teams out. And in many of the games we played this year, I think we've given up garbage time touchdowns in like 5 games. So, you know, culture has become like a big word in football. I'm a Bears fan. Terrible to watch, terrible culture. And you can just see it in pre-snap penalties or lack of discipline. I think just watching the Notre Dame team this year mature to a team that regardless of opponent, you were getting a really solid effort out of, kind of had me become a believer. And then I think
Mhm.
the hire of Denbrock
Mhm.
has it's introduced a staff that I think allows Marcus Freeman to do what he's probably best at as a head coach. I think he's a strong tactical coach on the defensive side, but more than anything, I think he's able to kind of tune his frequency to his players and find a way to have them mentally prepared to play really well every game. So, was there a particular game in the second half of the season where I started to buy into it? No. I mean, I predicted a loss in the last few games of the season, and I did highlight I thought USC could be trouble.
Mhm.
But I will say, strangely, at the end of games when Marcus Freeman's interviewed, I now make my children like listen to it because he just the way in which he communicates, the way there was something that he said that Marcus Freeman said in a press conference this year. I want to win every single play. I just think it's clear when you watch Notre Dame play that there's an attention and an intentionality about winning on a play-by-play basis, which I think is unique. And I don't think that we observe that under Brian Kelly's regime. I feel like he got the
Mhm.
name Big Game Brian. The team didn't always play great in big game settings. And they also backslid off of good wins pretty regularly, where it'd be like we're 22-point favorites against Pitt and we're in a dogfight for our lives with 3 minutes to go in the game. So I think he's been fun to watch as a coach this year, just to see the team, rise to a level that I don't think we've seen in terms of a consistency of excellence performance in a long time.
No, it's big of you to Big of you to pick up on that. I didn't get big game Brian. I didn't realize that followed Kelly around. Did not follow through on it. But let's play a game real quick to see how what we really think Freeman ranks. Because the four remaining head coaches in the playoffs: Marcus Freeman, Sark, James Franklin, and Ryan Day. Where would you guys rank those four in terms of you'd want them coaching your team? James, do you have them in order?
Yeah. Uh, I think I would go Freeman, Sark. There's a lot of ways to slice this.
Yeah.
And these are they're interesting programs because it's sometimes hard to say, is like the coach the good recruiter or is the program? I mean, Ryan Day, his biggest knock has always been he just walked right into
Hmm.
Urban Meyer's Ferrari. Um, so I would say Freeman, Sark, Day, and then James Franklin,
Yeah.
who I've never thought highly. Talk about a guy who doesn't win like on the big stage very often.
Yeah.
Impressive win over Oregon, for sure, but uh, man, he
For
trips
Day.
up. He bullies bad teams and then like falls apart against good
You talking
competition.
about Day or Franklin?
I'm sorry, Franklin.
Franklin.
Yeah.
Mike, what's your order?
Yeah, so I'm also going Freeman at one, right? But I think, and I won't be too long-winded here, but when Dabo was really running, he had Venables as a complement. I think that Freeman goes one, but I think you have to look at the staff. I think the offensive coordinator, defense coordinator, are
Hmm.
great. And down to position groups like Biaggi, our special teams, we've run like what, seven different successful fakes this year.
Mhm.
So I just I like the composition of Notre Dame's staff as one, and I think Freeman's perfect guy to be at the head of that staff. I go Franklin too, right? I think, and we might touch on this later. I think Penn State, in terms of many different factors, I think that relative to Ohio State and Texas, I think that's a program set up to be pretty mediocre often. And the standard at Penn State's been pretty high since Franklin got there. And no, they haven't been over the hump, but the fact that he's winning with consistency at Penn State, I think signals that he's a good program builder. I go Sark three. I don't really know enough about him, but I think, Gardner, you probably know more, but he's taken what Texas is one of those programs that's always got like beautiful pieces, but often is made into a mess. He's coalesced around he's brought these beautiful pieces together in a more effective way than a lot of his predecessors have. So I gave him three. I give Day four. I actually think Ryan Day's a really good coach. I agree with, Jim Harbaugh's third base reference. But I gave him four only in the sense of, after the Michigan game when, Michigan didn't play with a lot of their top players in that game. One thing that the media reflected on was just how tightly wound Ryan Day was around that game. And
Hmm.
Ohio State clearly a much, much better team in terms of the product they could put on the field than Michigan. And it just seemed like, Ohio State was spun around its axle the whole day. So part of me just wonders if Ryan Day struggles. I think he's a great program leader, but I think under pressure, I think maybe his want to can be almost too much and
Hmm.
can impair his ability to kind of utilize what he has.
Yeah. I matched James. I went Freeman, Sark, Day, and Franklin. Interesting your takes on Franklin, Mike. I came in like an hour ago and I was gonna have Sark first because I feel like Sark, he'd been through that Saban tree that I give credit to, but then I looked, he really hasn't established that much winning yet. Like Texas really got good last year. Um,
It was kind of amazing he got the job. I mean, there are some interesting parallels with him and uh, Marcus Freeman. Now, Sark has more head coaching experience, like some stops along the way, and then
Mhm.
his documented personal troubles. But um, they've got a similar, I think, demeanor with their teams. Sark, I think, really is a brilliant offensive mind. So like there's Mac Brown,
Mhm.
Texas, which is like we're
Mhm.
gonna recruit, we're gonna have better players than you, and we're just but Mac Brown's like a terrible game day coach. Sark, you watch their scripted plays at the beginning of the first half and the second half, like I mean, he's
Yeah,
just a
heard
brilliant
that.
offensive mind.
Yeah,
Um, James Franklin, I just had to pull it up. I mean, his stats against ranked teams are just atrocious. So in 11 seasons, 13 and 27 against ranked opponents. Versus the top 10, he's 3 and 17. Versus
jeez,
the top 10, he's 1 and 13. Versus Ohio State, he's 1 and 10. Um, Most of his losses have come against Michigan. So
that's a
I
rough.
mean, that's why Penn State, like, he's in a weird spot with them because, well, we'll get into that. I think Mike
Yeah,
knows Penn State better than I do.
well, we'll get to that. Those James Franklin stats are nuts, James. I mean, it follows him everywhere. I have a quick a pop quiz. Among those four head coaches, who has the most career wins?
Sark,
I'd say Franklin.
It is Franklin by
I
quite a bit.
knew it right after I said it.
Yeah, 125. Sark is 84. And Franklin's been around, and he's had Penn State at 10 and 2, 11 and 2 a lot. I think Mike,
You
to your
guys,
point, yeah,
like, I feel old. Like, things happen in sports and in life where I'm like, oh, he's been there like 5, 6 years. And then you're like, no, he's been there 12. You're like, oh my gosh.
in a long time.
I can't figure out how he's been there that long. I mean, we were in school together when Joe Pa and Jerry Sandusky fell from grace, right? And I thought they
Mhm.
had Bill O'Brien in between.
For 1 year, I
So,
think.
For a
oh,
few
is that
years.
short?
Was it
Okay.
just 1 year, James? I think it was a little more than one.
Maybe it was. This is what I'm talking about. And then he went to the Texans and,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. No, it's I mean Franklin was decent at Vanderbilt, a couple 9-win seasons. So yeah, we'll get to Penn State a bit more, but any cleanup from Georgia, anything we haven't hit, any takeaways from that game? I know I did my takes Thursday night, and gave Freeman a ton of credit. Um, I have one, but anything you guys have that you want to talk about with Georgia, the game?
Only thing I would say is I think Mike made really good points on Denbrock, and I do think his age is helpful. Like for some reason, he just feels like a steady hand. Like you got a young head coach in a very, very hard job. Denbrock has seen it all. And that play call at the end of the half, that like he knows Riley Leonard, he knows his limitations, and he just called the perfect play, like all balls, that pretty it's like a good shot to take, but it wasn't super high risk either. Like I would think maybe the
Yeah.
worst that happens is like you turn it over and you don't get your field goal or whatever.
You talking about the
But
play action play, the touchdown?
yeah,
Yeah, it's like a 13-yard pass, which crazy that we think like, oh my God, like he let Riley throw it, and the
yeah.
ball
Well, I
was a
mean,
little underthrown too. I mean, Collins made a nice catch.
oh, totally. I mean, I thought we were just going to take three and be done.
Yeah. Oh, well,
I love hockey and I love football. Like ending those 2 minutes at the
yeah.
beginning of a half and at the end of a half are so crucial. And it's the same in hockey, the first 2 minutes of a period and the last 2 minutes of the period. And so much shit happened at that end of the first half. And of course, the beginning of the second half, it was like that was curtains.
Because I think this team has swagger. I don't know which of you guys said maybe they don't, or because I think it's like, and Marcus says it, they got to be aggressive. Like they know they have to be aggressive, and I we saw it during the year, a lot of going for it on fourth down. I think the special teams trickery is about being aggressive. Because I also sense like Freeman might know his team's not as good as an Ohio State if we're looking ahead. Like talent wise, Georgia talent wise, man to man, we're probably not there. But you combine some aggressive kind of plays like that, a swagger. This team needs that.
Yeah, I said that. And maybe it's more of like an endearing swagger, I guess. Guess I'm showing my Notre Dame age a little bit as well. But when I think like swagger, I think of the U, like when they
Oh
just
yeah,
would like
oh
they
yeah, that's
walked
different.
off the bus and it was like, oh shit, they're here. And like they knew it, everyone knew it. They're like, we're taking your girls after the game, like, um, So
We've Christian swagger, good boy swagger.
yes, like chest bumps after, Baptist League layups.
Any cleanups for you, Mike, on Georgia? You want to
The
talk
only
about?
thing I would say that resonated with me, that I would, and maybe you touched on this, I just don't recall from your podcast. So we won on the defensive line in a way that we didn't against USC. I think USC was very successful throwing the ball, but we were really struggling to get pressure. So I think it was Oben did the strip sack, and Tuli Alamaka pretty much shut down a Georgia drive, beating the left tackle on a sack. So, the only thing I could say is certainly, it's always going to be Golden's MO to bring an extra body, but Notre Dame's defense is so much more dynamic if we can get some one-on-one victories in the passing game against the offensive line. And I credited that performance in the Georgia game as probably maybe the most unanticipated surprising win that we won in a meaningful way on the defensive line in that game.
Maybe maybe the position group I was most surprised by that we were just getting free sacks. And look, but then again, Stockton, and I didn't look at the stats before. He has a high sack rate, so maybe that's part of it too. But that was nice and surprising. I got one. What did you guys think about when they poured the Gatorade on Freeman? Did you think anything of that?
I'm not wild about it, but I'm kind of becoming like douche old man hardo. Like, it's like I don't know. I mean,
Come on, Gardner.
baseball gets blasted after every time they clinch or advance in a series, like they just
That's true. It's
Yeah, but I
true.
mean, if you think about and you guys are pups, but like the first giant Super Bowl run, they Gatorated Parcells after every win. You
Each
know,
playoff win?
no, every game they Gatorated him every game of that season
I think
that
it's
they
because they
won.
hated him.
Uh, I don't know if it was Carl Banks or I don't know if Pepper Johnson was on the squad at that time, but anyway, it didn't bother me. I thought it was. It was interesting that they checked with Marcus Freeman if they could do it, but generally speaking, I'm like, you know, winning a football game it's everything, right? It's so much. You put those kids put so much into it, and they do it with Marcus Freeman. So, I'm always I like the phrase "sing when you're winning."
Yeah.
You're winning games, have fun with it. I'm not going to sweat it.
My thing, and I guess especially because the New Year's Bowl drought, right, that everyone's talked about, you know, I guess I'm okay with it from that standpoint. I grew up. My second dad is Coach K, so I grew up. He would tell us you only storm the court when we win a national title, and so that kicked into me. I was like, "Ooh, are they?" And it's part of looking ahead to Penn State. I'm like, "Geez, that was a pretty big emotional win for us. Are we ready? Ready for the next? What's next?" I don't know. But let's get to this matchup. Let's get to Penn State. Uh, History, right? Teams haven't played in what, 17 years or so. I go back 15 years as a strong, devoted college football fan. Someone tell me about Penn State, right? Any of the Notre Dame Penn State rivalry that's out there, where their program is. Mike, are you in a good position to do this
Yeah, yeah,
as
I
our
can I
elder
can
as our
do.
elder statesman?
I mean, in terms of like Penn State history, I would say first it's kind of known as the cradle of linebackers. Uh, Produced Jack Ham, LeVar Arrington, Paul Posluszny had his day in the sun, right? So, when you think kind of old timey, kind of between the tackles football, Penn State's had great linebackers. Secretly, or not, maybe not secretly, but maybe with less fanfare, great running back school too. They've turned out Franco Harris, Saquon Barkley, Larry Johnson.
Curtis Enis,
What's that?
Oh,
Curtis Enis.
I know that name.
Yeah, hitting me with that Bears
He's
number
Bears.
5 overall draft pick of Curtis Enis. That still hurts. But they had a great running back when they went. I think they went undefeated their first year in the Big Ten. Kijana Carter,
Oh
who
yeah.
was I think the number 1 overall pick, but did his knee. So Definitely, and even this team, and I'm not well versed in their roster enough, but there's first round picks on this year's team too. I think Fashanu, and then they've got an edge guy. So
Hmm.
Penn State, the top end of Penn State's roster has always been really good, and they've definitely turned out a lot of great players. And I think most notably at linebacker and running back. In terms of the rivalry with Notre Dame, 9-1 all time, right? Modern era, the Penn State blog that I read tonight about it, modern era Penn State's had the better of it. We kind of Rockney just rubbed their nose in it, which, every Notre Dame fan should enjoy those 20s wins. Um, and then in the 80s, they had a 12-year series, like 81 to 92. Penn State wiped the floor with Jerry Faust, RIP,
Hmm.
in peace. And then Lou came aboard in 86, and I think Joe Pa took like 86 and 87, and then when Lou really got it cranking, we had the better of the tail end of it. The one that kind of strikes a memory that's a Notre Dame historic game in 92, it was the last game of the rivalry because Penn State was joining the Big Ten. And so that game's really famous for a couple reasons. One, there was a famous poster that kind of went around Notre Dame football fan circles from the 92 game called Irish Impact. And it was like an insane goal line stand where like their guy was trying to jump the pile and Notre
Oh
Dame
yeah,
linebackers
I've
met
seen that
him
picture.
and stopped it. So a very famous poster from that game. And then also Rick Meyer, I think a son of maybe Goshen, Indiana. He was the quarterback for the team.
Hmm.
Indy scored to go down 16-15 basically as I think time was expiring. Indy goes for two, and Meyer kind of somewhat a la Joe Montana, the catch kind of fades right, throws into the end zone, and Reggie Brooks caught a 2-point conversion to end the 12-year series and win the game 17-16. And that from a Notre Dame fan perspective, probably like the high point of the rivalry.
Yeah.
And then, as you mentioned, there were two games in the Weiss era.
Hmm.
So second year Brady Quinn, Notre Dame
Hmm.
dominated Michigan or Penn State, and then Weiss's third year, it all went to hell in a handbasket when Brady Quinn left, and Penn State had a good team that year, and they killed Notre Dame. So
Hmm.
not a lot of recent history, but that 80s 90s series was a notable kind of independence battle when I think both programs were in a good place, especially under the Holtz and Paterno regimes.
Got it. Yeah, but not a lot of playing since then. In bowl games, have we recently? No, right? Nothing.
Only bowl game I remember that I saw that we
Yeah.
played was like the 76 Gator Bowl, which precedes me. ND won it.
Hmm.
The interesting thing is they were both independent, but they really didn't play. And Paterno got that thing cranking in the 60s.
Hmm.
And Penn State had trouble finding opponents. So part of me thought maybe this was more like the Michigan rivalry before I started looking it up because I was born in 78. I was like, maybe they played every year between 50 and 92. But for some reason, Notre Dame and Penn State didn't circle each other on the calendars for a lot of their times being kind of mutual independence.
I think if Penn State had been better over the last 25 years, I think regionally, they're one of New York's closer, like, good programs. And I like their jerseys. I think their jerseys are fresh and classic. Alternate reality where they've been better, I could have grown up more of a Penn State fan. Again, because I'm not Rutgers. My sister went to Syracuse, but do we buy? Are they a mirror program to us? Do you guys?
100%.
When I said that at the start, what did you guys?
Well, that so Penn State kind of viewed itself under the Joe Pa era as like the city on the hill in some of the ways that Notre Dame fans talk about like we do it the right way. You think of the programs like Penn State, no names on the back of the
Mm,
jerseys. Notre Dame, I think at least since Holtz, no names on the back of the jerseys
mm,
except bowl games.
mm.
When Penn State gets a recruiting commit, they say we are. I don't know, like on Twitter. But when like Kelly was the coach, like it used to be we are ND hashtag whenever we got to commit, like um we're annoyingly similar in terms of like how both fan bases view themselves as somehow morally superior to the other teams that they play. It's weird.
I mean, the spread in this game is like two. Like it's an evenly handicapped game. But thanks for that, Mike. So let's get into this matchup. What are some key storylines, matchups? Break it down just a little bit. James, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll take a swing. Uh, I think it's gonna be a war in the trenches. I think, Penn State is, um, they've got draft picks on their defensive line and at the linebacker position. Um, I'm curious what Notre Dame's gonna do on special teams because this is like our new thing. Is added like
Gotta be.
it just add a new wrinkle, and I feel
Hmm.
like a coach like James Franklin he's a good mark. Like he's a guy you could expose bad, and so I'm curious what they're cooking up. It's hard to believe, but this might be the best quarterback we've faced all year.
Mm.
Maybe USC. I mean, what's his face at USC kind of played out of his mind. He played a great game.
Malava, yeah.
Iowa or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and he kind of lit us up a little bit. But
Not nearly as many weapons though. I mean, well, on the
no,
wide out, right? We know Penn State's got the big tight end, Warren. Running backs, they got Singleton's a top five running back draft prospect. You know,
yeah,
he's got some explosion, but not the
I,
wideouts. And USC killed us with the wideouts, right?
yeah. I used to always. It goes to our earlier conversation. I used to always be so nervous in the big games where I felt like we might have to catch up when Notre Dame was going to have to like catch up from 10 or 14
Yeah.
down early. Um, I don't foresee that happening against Penn State.
Hmm.
And if it did, I don't think Penn State can just run away from Notre Dame.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah.
it's the tri cliche stuff. It's turnovers. I mean,
Hmm.
look at and special teams. How did Notre Dame beat Georgia? Turnovers and special
Turnovers.
teams.
We're best in the country turnover margin.
Yeah.
So we don't know where it'll come from. Mike, what do you think when you look at this matchup?
Yeah, I really actually echo Guard's sentiments there, right? I mean, I think I haven't watched a ton of Penn State. They're not the most exciting team to watch
Mm.
line it up. They didn't play they didn't their schedule this year, we watched a little bit of the Minnesota game. They've had some I would say they've had some teams that were more kind of just bowl eligible teams to give them fits. Minnesota gave them fits this year. Boise I thought was in the game. Boise's kind of an elevated mid-major, but I watched a little bit of the Ohio State game, and the way Penn State scored in that game was a defensive touchdown.
Hmm.
And so to Guard's point, right, I think they are also a team that plays complementary football. And so, I think turnovers are or when they play teams with better rosters, the turnover margin is one that matters a lot to Penn State. I agree I agree that their quarterback there's not it's not being bounced around that this quarterback could be a first round pick if he comes out and plays well against Notre Dame. Uh, so and I've heard their tight end's great. So I don't know a ton about Penn State, but it does feel like, um, this feels like a Ravens Steelers
Hmm.
kind of low scoring. And there's going to be kind of inflection point plays that I don't think are going to be like, dynamic offensive plays. I think the inflection point plays in this game could be, the strip sack or
Hmm.
making a long field goal.
Hmm.
Or just flipping the field with a good punt. It certainly feels like a game that there's a lot of confidence in the Notre Dame fan base, which actually is making me a little bit nervous. I think Penn State is very well situated to grind out a victory in the same way that Notre Dame likes to grind out victories.
Well, it's funny because I've been doing a lot of research on the other side and following a lot of like Penn State accounts, and there's a similar optimism on their side, right? Calling their running attack better than ours, saying their rush defense is better than ours, saying, and it's that mirror matchup. For me, it starts at the tight end. Warren, he was a three-star prospect, and I saw in one preview before the year, he was like the 33rd ranked tight end in the country. Like Mitchell Evans was second. So I think his year came out of nowhere, but 98 catches. And they'll run him also. I think against like Ohio State, they ran him a bunch. I think he throws also, like trick plays. What's weird, I don't think we really went up against a really strong tight end this year. Like I can't think of a matchup where we did that. And I don't know if I fear that with our safeties, with Watts and Schuler. Like I fear, leaving Gray or Moore on an island like USC did, and what Georgia Stockton did sometimes. He threw for 230 yards. He should have had more if that guy caught that deep one. So I don't know how we're gonna play Warren. But he's the biggest part of their offense.
He is like a Penn State. I'm sorry, we're at after hours. He's a Penn State wet dream. He's from Mechanicsville, Virginia, 6'6", 257, white boy, and wears number 44. It's like that's out of central casting for Penn State. The other things I was going to mention, I don't come across a lot of Penn State grads in my neck of the woods. I
Yeah.
know there's a lot in New York City.
Mm.
I've talked to some folks in Philly and around. This is a very sanctimonious fan base, and they've done a pretty good job of memory holding. Pardon the uh, like one of the worst scandals in sports history.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't that long ago. And not only have they kind of just like memory hold it, they still kind of like hold Joe Pop and like the Lord like, well,
The statue's down though, right? Isn't the statue down?
yeah,
Okay.
they tore it down like Saddam's.
Accomplished that. Um, Big Ten, Penn State, Sandusky, Michigan State, Larry Nasser. I don't know why that came into my head just there, but Big Big Ten's killing it.
Long winners.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Penn State podcasts. I know that. As I was looking for one to look up, there were like already like 8 previews up for this game like yesterday. I'm like, we're still getting over the Sugar Bowl, which is another point. They have 2 extra days to prepare. Um, Warren's a big one. The running game, because I don't think anyone's better than when Love is healthy, right? Love and Price and Williams. Love's not fully healthy.
No.
Um, Singleton was a big 5-star guy. Number one running back in his class. He's somewhat explosive. Catches a lot of balls out of the backfield. Against Ohio State, caught 6 for 54. So we're going to see a lot of that, which I don't think we've seen a lot of guys, quarterbacks throwing to running backs either. Um, they kind of feel like an old Brian Kelly team where like we're good at running back and tight end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't, it's good that you know some of this about Singleton. I mean, I think, looking at it from like a Notre Dame perspective, they have there's a speed element and a scheme element that I think Golden has done. The turnover that Notre Dame forced against Georgia in the red zone on the handoff to the Georgia tailback, that was schemed, that was not a mistake by Georgia, that was schemed. So yeah, certainly and Notre Dame has played teams where their design of their offense is to be an effective running team and done well against those teams. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously it sounds as if he's an elite back, but I think the premise of Penn State kind of running the ball down Notre Dame's throat all night is one that would surprise me.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. He hasn't had a game where he's like, dominated. I don't know his
No.
high water mark for the season. Maybe like hit 100 yards against West Virginia and BGSU, Bowling Green. Did you already say that? I've been like looking at all sorts of Penn State stuff.
BG.
Um, they
Yeah.
should have lost to USC.
Yeah.
Yes. Should have
They
lost
squeaked
USC, should
by
have lost to Minnesota.
Minnesota.
The other game, the Illinois game, is one they're riding high on, right? What, 21-7. Illinois was a decent team this year. And that's where I'll bring in Abdul Carter, right? He's not a first round pick. He's like a top 5 pick. Like
Right.
Yeah, he's legit.
is he healthy though, right? He's dealing with something also. Um, second in the nation in tackles for loss, 11 sacks. And I'm hearing that he actually might be in the shadow role of Riley, which apparently that's what they did against Illinois' quarterback Altmaier. I don't know Illinois well. I'm hearing that Altmaier was a running quarterback. He ran for 200 yards in the year. I also heard one podcaster say, Riley's a runner just like Aller's a runner. Aller's run for 300 yards. Like I think there's a lot of underappreciation for Riley. Um, I just don't. I don't think in the previews if you haven't, and maybe I'm being a hypocrite, right? Because I haven't watched a lot of Penn State, but I'm like, if you haven't watched a lot of Notre Dame, you don't know what makes the offense click, and like that's this three-headed monster at running back.
For sure. I do mean this though. I really do think their best win in the season is only losing to Ohio State by 7. That's their best win on the year.
A little bit better than Indiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I feel like this should be reversed, right? This should be our quarterfinal matchup. Georgia should be our
Yes.
semifinal matchup.
Well, so one thing I was just going to say in terms of like matchup analysis, right? So again, some of this is Notre Dame centric, but watching Notre Dame play Georgia, um, Georgia would catch the ball in space, and the Notre Dame defense was closing down space in a meaningful way.
Oh yeah.
In like turning big plays into small plays. I guess not knowing a ton about how Penn State's going to win, I think that, Notre Dame is a team, if I were Penn State, which I think has, a great tight end, but otherwise, like looking in some of their more, against some of the better defenses they've played, they haven't been prolific. If I were Penn State in the way that Notre Dame has also kind of manufactured big plays through trickeration, I think that, if I were Penn State and I were looking for a way to beat Notre Dame's defense, I would be looking, instead of, long matriculation drives, I might look at some different spots on the field to beat Notre Dame. And I think they're tough to beat head up. I think Penn State would be in their interest to run 2 to 3 kind of interesting plays where they try and get a guy open in a meaningful way for a 50-60 yard play. And I think it comes down to Notre Dame being maybe one of the most aggressive teams in pursuit and closing space that I've seen on the defensive side of the ball.
A little misdirection.
Yeah.
You're encouraging some yeah. Let's do it. Let's get some predictions going. Who wants to pop on off first?
Mikey.
Yeah. So again, start the year, I had Notre Dame going into Kyle Field and Texas A&M, and I had Notre Dame losing. Notre Dame pulled that out. And then I predicted Notre Dame would lose, and I thought USC would be the team to do it in their last 4 or 5 games of the season. Howard Cross he's got an ankle injury.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying he's practicing, but one of the things I think is notable to Notre Dame has been the spine of their defense, anchored by a great defensive tackle position. So I think with Riley Mills out, Howard Cross potentially limited. I think there's some challenges at the defensive tackle position, which I think is fundamental to how Al Golden wants to run the defense. I don't know the litany of Penn State injuries. I think Penn State's benefited from a somewhat easy road to the semifinal game. I think it's going to be a bloodbath on both sides, but I've got a pit of the stomach feeling that Penn State ekes one out.
No.
And I'm going to go, let's say 20-17 Penn State.
Man, bummer. James, what do you think?
I was like the exact opposite. My thought is, first of all, I can't believe the total on this game is 45.5. I think this is like first team to 20 is going to win.
Mm-hmm.
and there's different ways both these teams can get there. I think a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown. I wouldn't be surprised if either of those play a factor. But I'll go Irish 20, Penn State Sandusky's 16. And how do you get to 16? Glad you asked. 8 safeties. No, a touchdown and 3 field goals.
Mhm.
So a little bit of bend, but don't break. I don't know, man. I will say another storyline that I think is just going to be interesting in these couple games is this is a lot of football for these kids. Like this is like unprecedented
Yeah.
territory, and I know like everybody is really banged up at this point, and so I don't know how NFL teams like. I think they've got their pharmaceuticals, how they like patch together their roster every week. I don't know how I think it's going to be interesting to see how these teams hold up, especially in very physical games like we're going to see with Penn
Well,
State and
and
Indy.
Penn State played an extra game. They lost the conference championship game.
That's right.
So,
And they
and
played that game, right? Because that was for a bye. So
yeah,
they that wasn't a
yeah.
and I think, I mean, just also notable is that you know, Penn State played a lot of reasonably close games as well. So I mean,
Right.
this being their 15th game is a true 15th game. There's not been a ton of there's not been a ton of games where their starters sat for a half or so.
All right. All right. So I got to break the tie somehow. So I'm worried about a letdown, which is crazy to say, but this team has had letdowns before after big games. Pete Sampson in The Athletic, he described the state of the locker room after Georgia elated, emotional, and exhausted. I talked about the Gatorade bath that worried me. Felt like we won our big game. Throw in the 2 day less days of rest. Penn State's had cakewalks, but I can't get around the fact that this Penn State team, I feel like they're frauds until proven otherwise. I called them a Brian Kelly Notre Dame team, right? Strong at tight end and running back. They have some 5 stars, but a whole lot of 3 stars on their team. We're a solid 4 star team throughout. Kelly couldn't win the big one. We just won a big one. We just beat Georgia, for Christ's sake. We are now part of that tier that can beat those teams. And it's almost like we're now gifted the opportunity to go play the team, another team that's trying to knock at that. We can't just go and lose to this team. We
No,
we can't go from Georgia. I mean, almost like in the old world, we'd be happy with a Georgia win, and that's the end of our season. But we can't go lose to Penn State. Um, I have ND in this game. It's a program, it's a culture, it's a gutted out win. The Love injury worries me because then all it takes is a Price injury, and now Aeneas Williams is every down. But they have Abdul Carter injury. They have their own banged up stuff. Um,
yeah,
so I just think, and Mike, you bring up Cross, but I'm like, every player was on fire in that Sugar Bowl game. I went through all like 45 players that played. They played out of their minds. RJ Oben getting like out of their minds. Where I gotta believe there's something bigger going on here. I have Notre Dame by more than a touchdown. I have them 20-10. I just don't. I don't think Franklin, Penn State, it's not their time. It's our time to get up there. I'll hold. If Ohio State or whoever's next, that might be different, but not this time for me.
love it. Yeah, I wish Notre Dame was at the point where they're Alabama and they just like walk in and expect to win and they win a game like that and like they don't even celebrate because it's business as usual and expected. Or that's not who they are. And so that was just maybe there's a hangover. I hope not. Um,
How
but
sweet would it be after the game if Riley Leonard's getting interviewed? He's got two like Miami OnlyFans models in between like each arm, and interviewer comes up to him, the talk of the savior has evaporated, and he's talking about the spoils of war. He turns
Miami
into
will do
Genghis
that to
Khan,
Hey,
people.
hey,
Yeah.
Let him.
Two really good-looking fan bases going to South Beach in the middle of January.
Let's have fun. Let's enjoy the extra football. Mike and James, you guys are a blast. Thanks for doing this. Let's get the Irish a win. See you in Atlanta,
Let's do it.
From your mouth to God's ears.
man.
Let's
All right.
do it for sure.
All right,
Thanks,
fellas,
Andre.
thanks so much.
Love
Enjoy
you
the
guys.
game.
Thanks, Trey.
All right, peace out.
Bye.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. This is a great time of year. Great time of year for college football. I'm going back 4 episodes now, following the Irish through the playoffs. Predictions have been hitting. I predicted a big win over the Hoosiers. Predicted the key storylines that fell to Notre Dame's side against Georgia. Let's rock it. Let's have fun. So go check those out and share this around, right? Share this episode. Anyone you think that big Notre Dame fan, college football fan, Penn State fans, send it to them too. Anyone you think it might be something of interest, send it around. Let's grow this thing. All right, folks, take care. Talk to you soon.